can't hear me, and I'll try to speak up a little louder. First of all, I want to thank Steve and Ken for inviting me to come down here. I know that your group has had a demonstration on routing before, and I'm hopeful that this won't be too repetitive, but more additive. And as part of this demonstration, there's really two parts. One is a didactic part, and then we'll do two different demonstrations. And I'll ask if any one of you want to actually come on up and use the router as part of the demonstration. So let's get started. So this is my granddaughter. As she floats in the air, her father threw her up there, and you can see that she has this look of excitement, but also trepidation, not knowing if she's going to get caught on the other end. And that's kind of the way I feel today. This is my second demonstration, so hopefully you'll be patient. A little bit about me and how I got into wood turning. Like probably a lot of you, when I went to school, middle school, shop was part of our curriculum. And I made a stool and a lamp and a few other things. But it wasn't until I was about 12 to 13 that my father built this water ski boat in our garage. And this was from plans from Popular Mechanic, the double V hull that he made completely out of wood and fiberglass the hull. And we water skied behind this boat for 5 to 8 years and had no problems other than the fact that it weighed an incredible amount. Even the 75 horsepower Johnson took a while to get up on your skis. We'll fast forward to probably a decade ago, and I kind of got into flatwood myself. This happens to be cabinetry in a laundry for my son. I did closets for pretty much all of my kids that lived in the neighborhood, which were 3. So I got into huge cabinetry, and that was interesting too, and enjoyed it. And then I turned myself into kind of more towards furniture. These are 2 end tables with through and through tenons, no nails, no screws, and the top was stone. This happens to be a breakfast table that I made for my daughter. It's made out of chestnut. Chestnut is extinct, and I was able to find reclaimed chestnut from a barn and put this together. Again, no nails, no screws. Actually, this comes apart in case she's moving and has to move. It's all wedged in. And I made this Ipe table for my other son's porch. I don't know whether anyone has any experience with Ipe. It's the hardest wood there is. It's the only wood that will sink. And actually, if you ever go to the Brumos Museum in Jacksonville, the racing museum with the Brumos Porsche, the walkway up to it is made of Ipe, and actually they used to make raceways out of Ipe. That's how hard it was. They used to actually drive on it. But hopefully that will last forever. Bugs won't get into it. Hard enough for humans to get into it. So I inherited this lathe probably 20 years ago, and that from my father. And this happens to be an old Delta lathe that's probably was about 70 years old when I inherited it. And it sat in my garage, and I used it to turn a few spindles for, gate leg tables where the spindles broke and I had to replace them. But I really didn't use it much because I was deathly afraid with 5 kids in the family that with the open pulley system and belt, that one of my kids would turn it on and decapitate a finger or something more severe. So I really didn't get into it a whole lot. And about a year before I retired, my wife gave me a present of a gift certificate to attend Woodcraft to learn how to bowl make. And I went to that, and I thought that was really cool. And so that kind of, at the same time, I should say, the flatwood was getting very heavy for the projects I was doing. And I thought, well, this is kind of nice. I can take something nice and small and won't be heavy as I get older. Well, as you can see, I started getting into large bowls. And if you take a 2-foot log that's a foot wide and it's wet, it weighs about 200 pounds. So I don't know that I really accomplished my goal. But fortunately, I have a chainsaw and that can cut the weight down. So anyways, for my retirement present, I went ahead and got this robust lathe. And that's what I've been using ever since and have been very happy with it. Let me know if I'm blocking. Let me move over this one. So let's move on to routing and woodworking. Basically, there's 3 key components. The first one is obviously the router. And I'm going to assume for this part of it that I'm going to really start from the basics. And many of you probably know all this and probably more than I'm going to even tell you today. But if any time along the way you have questions, let me know. The second key ingredient is how do we secure that router? And finally, the third component is you have to know indexing. So we'll go through each of these components fairly quickly. The router, there's various types. There's fixed versus plunge. Plunge meaning you can actually introduce the bit and the router into the wood at various depths. There's fixed and variable speed. And then routers have different collet size. And actually, as you go up from the 1/4 to the 1/2 inch, you get bigger bits and probably some better profiles. But it does come at a cost in terms of the size of the router and expense. This is kind of the basic router. We're not going to really talk about the base plate for our purposes in wood turning, but we use the body. It has the switch. It's a variable speed router, so you can control the speed there, and you have to mount it into a jig. First of all, about router safety. Make sure you unplug it before changing the bit. Second of all, make sure the bit is tightly secure. I'll never forget the first time I got a router. I got a new router bit, and I was really excited to use it, and I put the router bit in, and I thought I cranked it down nice and tight, and I was working in the back of my garage, and I flipped it on, and the bit went flying out and went 40 feet into the backyard. And I couldn't figure out what happened. And dumb me didn't realize that they had put a protective coating on the shank of the router, and I had just secured the whole thing together. And so it really wasn't secure at all. So lesson learned. Fortunately, I didn't get injured. As with any woodworking, you want to make sure that you wear hearing, eye, and dust protection. You want to make sure the work is secure, and that means the chuck is secure, the wood is secured to the chuck, and the router is secure in whatever jig you have. You don't want to start the router with the router buried into the wood. You want to introduce the router bit to the wood. And when in doubt, take lighter cuts. You can always go back and change it. Finally, you want to feed the router in the appropriate direction. And Ken just talked about that a little bit with his router table. And if you have any questions about that, the correct direction of cut is against the rotation of the bit. In routers, the bit rotates clockwise. So you want to introduce the wood into the rotation so that it grabs and helps maintain control as opposed to the other way. Yes, Ken?
Clockwise, looking down from the top.
Correct. Correct.
Looking down. The router table like I had. Bottom.
Right. No, it's the top down on the bit. Clockwise. If you go the other way, it acts like a wheel and grabs it and takes it away. And in wood turning, this is typically from left to right. Doesn't mean that you can't go right to left. And you'll see, we might even show a little bit of it today where you can make the cut from left to right and you can come back once you've made the cut to your original starting point. Although I tend to try to cut the router off to avoid more burning of the wood than anything. When we talk about embellishing and woodworking in terms of speeds of the bit that we use, if you look at the Fordham, it goes at 18,000 RPMs. The Dremel is anywhere between 4,500 and 30,000 RPMs. A variable speed router will go anywhere between 10 and 35,000. Micro motor carving will be up to 45,000, and if you take the high-speed NSK drill, that reaches speeds of 320,000 RPMs. Well, what does that mean for us in terms of routing? Well, the rim speed of that router bit is the circumference of that router bit times the router speed. So if one assumes and keeps the router speed at 20,000 RPMs, a 1 diameter router bit rotates at about 60 miles an hour. The 2-inch router bit rotates at 120 miles an hour, and the 3-inch router bit goes as fast as 180 miles an hour. So what that does tell us is that as we get larger and larger bits, we really need to slow the router speed down. 1 inch up to, you can go up to about 22,000, 1 to 2 inches, 20,000, and so on. Doesn't mean that you can take a 1-inch bit and actually go at 18,000. That's fine. And you can trial and error it as you go along and see what seems to work. So to avoid tear out and burning, bigger the bit, slow the speed. You can use paste wax or some type of lubricant on the bit to reduce the friction. When routing hardwoods, slow the bit down and try to maintain as constant a feed as you can. And just remember, if you notice that your work is beginning to burn, well, you have the option of slowing the bit down or moving more consistently or turning the router bit off before you come back the other way. So there's ways that you can limit the amount of burning. With that said, virtually everything I've done, short of piercing or going right off the end, ends up with some burning. So if you have a router that's going to go through, and you'll see it on the demonstration, where it actually, you have a stop and it's buried in the wood, you're probably going to get a little burning at that end. And that just means you're going to have to sand. Is everybody good?
Oh, great.
All right. Does that help?
Nope.
Test,
Volume up a little more.
test. Test.
Going higher.
Let's see. Let me make sure it's. How do you turn this on from here? Is that? Oh, there it is. It's up there. It's on. All right.
Yes.
Hello? Hello? There's a trick.
Well,
Hello? Hello?
that coming in.
Nothing coming in.
All right.
All right, I'll just speak louder.
Yeah, that's most of the stuff I heard.
And I'll come up here too, so maybe it's a little easier to hear. So didactic presentations can get boring, so I thought I'd introduce some levity to our presentation. What kind of wood do movie stars turn? Anybody know?
Hollywood.
Hollywood. Very good. There you go. Why does this greenish, soft hardwood have lots of friends? Anybody know? It's very good. It's poplar. All right. So, moving on to router jigs. Why do we use them? We use them because it keeps the router safe and secure. It also allows reproducible cuts as long as it is secure. So you've got to remember that. And there are a variety of different ways you can secure a router. Here's some examples up there on the left. You can see on the table, I've got multiple kind of homemade devices that I have made. The issue that I have had with them is that the front part of this gets pretty bulky. And if you're trying to route bowls and you're trying to come around, you start hitting either the indexing wheel or the headstock. So the other jig that you can see on the right is the Paul Howard jig. This is narrower. It actually, my learning in this is that it takes, even though I already had a 1/4 inch collet router, it didn't fit in this. So it takes a unique, I think there's clearly the Makita router. I think there's probably one other, but otherwise it doesn't fit. Now they do provide a little insert so you can actually put your Dremel tool in it and secure it. So that's the other way to do it. This has some other features that I'll go over in a second. There are 2 different ways to secure the router. One is to the ways or the lathe bed, and the other is actually in the banjo. I was hoping to show you both ways today. Unfortunately, with just a 6-inch radius on this, I couldn't get enough clearance. So everything